Oh, I did this on the other computer, but I didn't. Oh man, I found that I was gonna have you guys. I'm just gonna have to do two things at once. I'm not very good. So anyhow, you know, this week with all of the weather storms from last week, I've already changed the pacing guide. And there may be more changes coming, so it just depends on what information I get from admin. So keep an eye out for that. But for the most part, I've gone ahead and I've created due dates for pretty much the rest of the quarter. So a couple things that were taken over today, there are 2 labs due this week. There was one due yesterday for human digestion, where you were taking a look at an image of test tubes and trying to create some observations. And then our lab that's due, I believe, Thursday is on teeth. So there's a couple of things that we're going to be learning about in this week. So this week, we're going to be learning about forensic entomology, forensic anthropology, and forensic odontology. So a lot of forensic stuff, right? No wonder. So it's really cool though, because I'm learning with you guys, but it's really cool. We learn about how there's these different types of expertise that can be used to apply and solve some of these crimes. So for example, the first one I wanted to go over was the forensic entomology. And I'm getting a little frustrated because I found a great video to show yesterday and now I can't find it because I used a different computer. But give me one moment. I should be able to find it. But really quickly, in the chat, who can tell me what forensic entomology is? What's entomology?
Study of bugs.
Yeah, the study of bugs. And so tell me a little bit more. What's the study of bugs is entomology. So then why do we say forensic entomology? What's the slight difference with that?
Study of bugs in relation to crime. Help to
yes. Okay, so how many of you guys have had a chance to read through that unit? Yeah, and that's due today technically, so it's no big deal if you haven't. This is going to set you up though for great success. Does anyone have an idea of what are some of the things they talk about? Oh, you did do just the quiz. Okay, so yes, Caroline, you do not have to be the only one to answer. No worries. Does anyone else have, if you haven't had a chance, okay, you read through the bug section, Courtney, so what are some things that you figured out?
Depending how long the body has been there, there's going to be like, hang on, I have it right here. The bowfly life cycle. So for the first 23 hours, it's going to be eggs, and then for the next 72 hours, it's going to be first instar, second instar, goes around. And then 143 hours, you get an adult fly.
Great. This is like really my favorite thing that we've learned about so far. You're right. Yes, exactly. So we can use the life cycle of flies to better understand how long a body has been dead for, right? I think it's so interesting to be teaching because it's so funny. My main course that I teach is biology, which is the study of life, and forensic is almost the opposite, where it almost feels like it's the study of death and it's really morbid. But it's crazy that we can use this study of insects to understand what happened to a body, how long it's been dead, what is the process, and how we can use these insects as a natural way to use evidence and try to solve a crime. Now, in that reading, they talked about the original, when this originated, the use of insects to determine and solve crimes. What was that instant? Anyone? I know that Courtney and Caroline, you guys finished it. Did anyone else have a chance to finish that reading And if not, again, no big deal. But the first time, and this, if you haven't heard this, we've heard this before. This isn't new. The first time we've heard this idea of forensic entomology was actually in the Song Dynasty in China in the 1200s. So we've been using insects to understand crimes and try to use it as evidence for hundreds of years. So the first time they used it was when they had there was this murder that happened in the rice fields, and there was these farmers that had these things called sickles. They're like the kind of hook-shaped blade that they use to cut down all the rice in the fields. And there was this murder that happened. And so the person that was trying to oversee the field and try to find out who the murderer was, they actually knew that there was these flies or these insects that were attracted to blood. And so what he did is he had all of the farmers come out with their sickles, their blades, and put it out. And the insects were all attracted to one blade. And that blade had, like, you could not see the blood that was left over, but those insects knew. And that's how they were able to find out who the murderer was. So this has been in practice for hundreds of years. Now, I found this video. This is not the same video that I found yesterday. It is only 7 minutes long, but we're going to watch it really quickly to kind of see how insects and bowflies and different types of beetles are used to determine the death of the body. So again, I was able to find this, so let's hope this works. If it doesn't, I'll stop and I'll just find another video for us really quickly. Okay. That was really rough for me. I should have given some warning. I had assumed that you guys kind of knew what you were getting into when you took it. That was really gross for me. But what are some of the main things that you took away? So he spent a lot of time on the bowfly. So talking about this, thinking about how the bowfly can be used, why, how, what are some things that give us an indication? Why are bowflies so important in forensic entomology?
They can give us an idea of the post-mortem interval.
Okay, good. Awesome. What else? Yum, I know. Delicious. That's exactly what I needed before lunchtime. What else? Ethan or Nathaniel or Jessica. And if you haven't gotten to this section, it's fine. You can still be part of this conversation though. So what did you take away from this video besides, you know, bowflies and larvae? Do you guys know of any, like what, so we talked about the bowfly, right? But is there like other, is there anything else that like we know that can help understand? Right? We know that there's the bowfly. Are there other insects that we can think of that might help us kind of figure out how long it's taken for people to, you know, body decomposes? Oh my God, it's so gross.
Could you do like, oh, Nathan already said it, maggots.
Yeah, right. So we know that during the life cycle, we can understand that during the life cycle, when there's the larva, when there's the maggots, right? Maggots are a type of larva, and I like don't even know if I can continue on. And how they, you know, they move and they try to look for food and they're trying to look for a home and they use the body as a host. And so when a scientist, when an forensic entomologist comes upon this body, they're able to use how many there are, this cycle, to determine how long it's been since the crime had taken place. And that gives the detectives and investigators a time frame, right? That gives them an opportunity to a window of time to then narrow when the crime occurred, to try to figure out when, where it was, where's the body moved, you know, and then start to line up with other evidence. So today so like I said, I'm just doing a recap on the three types of forensic entomology, forensic anthropology, and forensic odontology. So that's a little overview of the forensic entomology. Are there any questions? I mean, of course, you should still be reading. They go into more detail in the lesson. They don't just stick with bowflies, although that is the first one to come onto the scene. But there are other insects that come and host the body, which gives us more information for the timing. So it's not just bowflies that come. It is other insects that come as well. So make sure that you're reading through that all. Questions on forensic entomology before we move into forensic anthropology. We're going to watch a TED talk on that and how this one specific forensic anthropology uses his knowledge to help bring closure to families. Are there any questions on forensic entomology at the time for the time being, though? No? Okay. All right. Let's take a look at what they say about forensic anthropology.
Year on conflict. Conflict
So this individual is a forensic anthropologist, and he did, spend time going over the two specific cases and what he is doing to help back in his home country in Guatemala. There were these atrocities. All of these people went missing. One thing I want you guys to focus on, what about his job? He pointed out a couple of things that forensic anthropologists do in order to, or can do in order to solve these mysteries. What are some things that forensic anthropologists bring to the table? How can they help when it comes to cases, and what do they use? So in other words, what were a couple of bones, right? Good, Courtney. So tell me more about that. What do you mean bones? What about the bones does he do in order to help solve these crimes?
He can figure out like when they were, I don't know, created or buried.
Yeah, are decomposed, right? Like he said, how the bones were. He was able to take a look at the bones and see, the body was decomposed all the way down to the bone, right? Good. They're able to use them to identify who the people were too. Yes. They were able to use the bone to identify whether it was male or female. They were able to put together the bones to figure out the age, right? And what else was a really big thing that really only came in the last couple decades that has made a huge difference when it comes to the case of oh my gosh, what am I trying to say? This huge thing that was able to put people specifically to the location or connect them. What is that? 3 letters that we use to represent a really big thing in biology.
I don't remember the letters, but I thought it was like he said military journal, but I think it's DNA.
It's yeah, you got it. So the bones are also, you can extract the DNA from the bones. That's a scientific revolution that has changed not only the way that we understand how our bodies work and how proteins are created and how our body uses DNA, but now we're able to find DNA and make sure that we can either, identify who the person is, identify who their family members are. So this is a big discovery that now anthropologists, forensic anthropologists have access to, right? What else about the bones allows the forensic anthropologists to determine what, about a case? We talked about the bones, we talked about the being able to figure out who the people were. What else can we do with bones? What else were they able to do? So in this particular case, they were able to do what? They were excavating. So when they talk about excavation, what they really are doing is they are removing all of the negative space, right? So they're removing all of the dirt around the bones. And they want to leave the bones in the same position, right? They don't want to really move the bones because why? If they were to remove the dirt and leave the bones in that initial area, what can they do with the way, like what do those bones tell us? What story does it share? What story can you use? Cause of death. Yes, exactly. If we are able to look at the way that one of the things he mentioned is that he was able to look at the bones and determine how they were dead, right? They looked at the skull and they found a singular gunshot wound, or they could look at the skull and also see that there was a bunch of machete marks, right? when he talked about that grave 54, I think, or grave 15, I can't remember. But he was talking about this one specific grave where he found 53 bodies. And what were some of the things that he picked out? What did he find out by looking at the cause of death, looking at specifically the position, right? He was able to see the position of the bodies when they died. What did that tell him? What did that tell the forensic anthropologist? Not just the cause of death, but what else did it tell them? Did they put up a fight where someone killed them? Yup, yes. And then also just in general, right? Thinking about, what the story was, right? When we are trying to find and solve a crime, we're trying to understand exactly what happened, not just the cause of death, but how they died, the moments that led up to it, the motive, right? Those are all things about part of solving a crime. It's not enough, right? When you are going into a court case, if you've seen, SVU and CSI and all of these different types of crime scene shows, one of the main things that they need is some sort of, they need to understand what happened. What was the motive? What was the reason? How did it happen? And one of the things that this individual was able to determine by finding these 53 different, bodies in this grave was that they were mostly defenseless, right? He was saying that the way that the bodies were layered on top of each other, he could tell that the way that those bodies fell, that they were on their knees, that they had their backs to the people, that they were blindfolded, right? So it wasn't just the bones, it wasn't just the DNA that he was able to extract from the bones, but it's about how those bodies laid, right? It was about how it told the story that they were defenseless. There wasn't a fight against it, that they were just unfortunately laid on top of one another. They were blindfolded, and that's how they were killed. And so that's also part of it. Now, there's also this other aspect. It's not just about the bones. What are other things that the anthropologists look at to try to put all of the pieces together, right? It's not just bones. What else is it? What else did he find? What other clues did he use to kind of help solve all of, closure and give closure to some of these families? What else? Wasn't just bones. So again, their clothing, yes, Jessica, exactly. He was also able to find the clothing, and he used the clothing as a way to bring it back to this evidence, this connection, because that's what the survivors, the victims, right, were able to associate that the victims were wearing. They were able to use the clothing that were found nearby to put together the identification of these bodies and being able to understand the time, right? Remember that finding clothing really tells you a lot about the generation as well, the timing of when all of this happened. So when we talk about forensic anthropology, we're trying to then move from, where we're trying to understand the body of bones, the way that things are situated, the DNA, the timing, the generation, the decade. We're trying to find anything else that gets brought along with those skeletons, right? So it's really important that we understand exactly what is being used, how it's being used, when we're trying to use all of the tools in our toolbox in solving a crime. And so, like we learned in the first section of this unit or of this class, there are different jobs, there are different roles when it comes to solving a crime. It's not just up to the detectives. The detectives are one piece of the puzzle. They have to reach out to these other specialists, like forensic entomologists, like forensic anthropologists. And what we're about to learn about now is forensic odontologists. So I'm trying to find a video that may be a little bit more engaging and not as long to understand odontology. So remember that, you know, a lot of people talk about their dental records and talk about how there was teeth found at a, you know, at a crime scene, or even if you learn especially when they were talking about in the lab that you're going to do about teeth, when there isn't enough remains left over of a specific body, that you can use the teeth to be able to identify it is. So let's watch this two minutes video, 2.5 minute video really quickly. So that way it's pretty quick. Are there any questions about forensic anthropologists? Any questions? Okay, well, this video does not seem to be working. Let's try to get this one. Okay, no questions on forensic anthropologists. All right, let's see a little bit about forensic odontology. So just to clarify, ante-mortem means before death, and then post-mortem means after death. So they do the following. They do human identification. They can determine ancestry, right? They can determine sex and age. They use this as bite mark analysis, abuse assessment, and then they can present testimony. Mhm. that's a very quick video of, forensic odontology and what it does. Unfortunately, I had another video that I wanted to do, but in general, we can use the teeth. The teeth tell us so much, right? It is unique to each individual. Notes that the teeth are going to be the same. Each tooth is going to be looked different, formed differently, and we use this as evidence, right? We use it to identify bodies. We use it to not just identify the victim, but we can also use it to compare to these suspects as well. If they have any sort of bite mark, if they have any sort of some sort of imprint on them, that they would then be able to use that against one of the victims. And so forensic odontology is a huge area of forensics, because it's really one of the things that if you burn a body, you can burn a body and have nothing left, but the teeth won't burn, right? The teeth will be left over. And so we can reconstruct that, like what she was saying in her video. They can use the leftover teeth to reconstruct it and create a cast or a mold of that individual's teeth, and then be able to figure out who they are by contacting their original, or their dentist, and get their dental records. So forensic odontology is very much like a puzzle piece that's trying to figure out what was going on. You can take a look at teeth and figure out where the fillings were, what dentistry work was done, and then you can use it to figure out. And does their jaw stay intact? I think it depends on the situation, but not necessarily, right? So if there is a burned body and their jaw may not even be left, because remember, it is made out of that bone. So the bone burns as well, and the teeth would remain just kind of left there. So, but I think that there is just a bunch of uses, and these different specializations really help towards finding and solving a case. And that's why you have different detectives and investigators. They call in these different resources depending on the crime and the situation, right? Don't forget, I didn't mention this earlier, but I should have. Forensic entomologists can also determine whether a body was moved. And they can do that by looking at the different species and the different variations, because we know that different animals or organisms have different traits and features that better suit their environment. So if there was a body that was moved, a day later or a couple hours later, depending on the bowfly that gets birthed in them and stuff, they can determine whether or not it was a bowfly from this area, from that area, because there are slight variations in traits that allow for that specific environment to be better suited, and then the entomologist can figure out what area that is. So that's a really big part of it. Forensic anthropologists can tell if a body was moved as well based on how it was laid, right? We talked about how you can find the bodies and the way that they're shaped or the way that they're laid. It tells a story of how they fell, how they got there. And then forensic odontologists really help with identification of bodies, understanding who they were, understanding how it can be connected to the suspect. So that's really what I had for you, and that's really what your week is going to entail. So that's a really big couple of lessons that you're going to be going over if you haven't had a chance to already. Small group, we're going to be able to, I'm going to try to put together a lesson where we're going to be able to use and put on our 3 different hats and solve a crime. So I'm looking at entomology and trying to figure out what happened to a specific victim. So that is what you're going to find for this week. Remember, you've got 2 labs this week, and then keep a lookout for any updates that I have for you on on any of things about the course, whether it's due dates or whether it's whatever the case may be. But that's what I have for you guys today. We are ending about 10 minutes early. So if you don't have any other questions, then that's what I've got. Otherwise, I can hang around for a couple more minutes and answer any questions that you have. So thank you so much for coming and joining me today. It was wonderful to have you here. I learned a lot. I don't know how much more I want to learn about forensic entomology, but I certainly had fun learning alongside you guys. All right. So thank you guys so much for coming. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And yeah, I'll see you at small group.